He was sure she had built a happy life with another man, until two little boys with his eyes proved him wrong. Alex Rivers had trained himself to believe that certainty was a form of strength. As the CEO of a fast-growing company, he made decisions quickly, rarely second-guessed them, and never allowed emotion to slow him down. His office sat high above the city, all glass and steel, a place where the past felt distant and irrelevant. From there, life looked orderly, controlled, and entirely his own. That was why he had convinced himself that Mia Carter was happy. In his mind, she had moved on easily, found someone steadier, someone who stayed. He imagined her life as quiet and complete, filled with routines that no longer included him. This belief had become comfortable over the years, a story he told himself whenever her name surfaced unexpectedly in his thoughts. If she was happy, then his leaving had not caused damage. If she was happy, then there was nothing to fix. They had loved each other once, deeply and without caution. Back then, Alex had not been a CEO yet, just an ambitious man with plans that always seemed just one step away from reality. Mia had believed in him in a way that felt almost frightening, as if she could see a future he was still trying to build. She listened when he talked about business, supported him when doubts crept in late at night, and never asked him to choose between her and his dreams. That made leaving easier than it should have been. When the offer came from another city, promising growth and recognition, Alex accepted without hesitation. He told Mia it was temporary, that distance didn't change what they had. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She only nodded, standing quietly in the doorway while he packed his suitcase, her hands folded tightly in front of her as if holding something fragile together inside her chest. Alex had taken her calm as understanding. He didn't notice the way she looked at him then, as if memorizing his face, nor did he question why she didn't ask when he would be back. He kissed her goodbye with the confidence of someone certain there would always be another moment later, another chance to talk, to explain, to return. The years that followed were filled with success. Alex rose quickly, building a reputation as someone reliable and decisive. He bought a larger apartment, traveled frequently, and surrounded himself with people who admired his discipline. When colleagues asked about his personal life, he answered vaguely, saying he had once loved someone but that life had moved on. Sometimes, late at night, when the city lights blurred into reflections on his office windows, he thought of Mia. The thought always arrived unexpectedly and left just as quickly, dismissed with the same familiar reasoning. She must be happy now. She deserved that. And believing it allowed him to continue forward without looking back. What Alex did not know was that certainty, when built on assumption rather than truth, was fragile. And that the life he imagined for her existed only because he needed it to. Mia Carter learned very quickly how loud silence could be. After Alex left, the apartment felt too large, every sound echoing in rooms that had once been filled with conversation and shared plans. She moved through her days carefully, as if any sudden motion might crack the fragile balance she was trying to maintain. Friends asked how she was doing, and she smiled in response, giving answers that were polite and incomplete, because the truth felt too heavy to explain. At first, she told herself that the distance would make things clearer. Alex had promised it was temporary, and she wanted to believe that ambition and love could exist side by side without one destroying the other. She waited for his calls, reread his messages, and adjusted her schedule around the time difference, convincing herself that patience was part of loving someone with big dreams. Then her body began to change. It started with exhaustion that sleep didn't fix, with mornings that felt heavier than the ones before. Mia brushed it off as stress, the natural result of missing someone and adjusting to being alone. When the nausea came, sharp and undeniable, she still resisted the thought that pressed quietly at the back of her mind. It wasn't fear that stopped her from acknowledging it, but disbelief. This was not something she had planned for, not something she had allowed herself to imagine. The test confirmed what her instincts already knew. She sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at the result until the world seemed to tilt slightly, as if everything had shifted just enough to be unfamiliar. Her first reaction was not panic, but a strange, hollow calm. She placed a hand on her stomach, trying to understand how something so small could already change everything. Alex was the first person she thought of. Her phone was in her hand before she fully realized it, his name glowing on the screen. She imagined telling him, imagined the pause that would follow, the way his mind would immediately begin calculating what this meant for his plans. She knew him well enough to predict that he would return, not because he wanted to, but because he believed he should. The thought made her chest tighten painfully. She didn't want to be a responsibility. Mia set the phone down and told herself she would wait for the right moment, for a time when she could speak without fear, when the words wouldn't sound like an accusation or a demand. Days passed, then weeks, and the right moment never came. Alex's messages grew less frequent, filled with updates about meetings and progress, excitement layered with exhaustion. She responded with encouragement, choosing her words carefully, keeping her own truth hidden behind reassurance. When the doctor confirmed she was expecting twins, the weight of her decision grew heavier. 2 lives now depended on her choices, and the future felt suddenly vast and terrifying. The doctor spoke gently, explaining what to expect, outlining risks and precautions, while Mia nodded and absorbed only fragments. She walked home afterward instead of taking the bus, needing the movement to ground herself, to remind herself that she was still capable of putting one foot in front of the other. That night, she cried quietly into her pillow, not out of regret, but out of fear of what lay ahead. She cried for the life she thought she was building, for the simplicity she had lost, and for the man who was now too far away to share this moment with her. When the tears finally stopped, something inside her hardened into resolve. She would do this on her own. Not because she didn't love Alex, but because she loved her children enough to want more for them than uncertainty. She began to plan carefully, saving money, rearranging her life, preparing for a future that no longer included waiting. Each choice strengthened her independence while widening the distance between herself and the truth she hadn't yet shared. Mia told herself she was protecting everyone involved. What she didn't yet understand was that protection, when built on silence, could also become a wall that no one knew how to cross once it was fully formed. The months that followed demanded more strength from Mia than she had ever known she possessed. Carrying twins changed everything, not only physically but emotionally, as if every thought now had weight and consequence. Her body grew tired more quickly, and simple tasks became negotiations with exhaustion. Still, she pushed herself forward, clinging to routine as a form of stability, believing that if she kept moving, fear would not have time to catch her. Doctor appointments became frequent, each one a reminder that she was no longer living only for herself. She learned the rhythm of heartbeats through the steady echo of machines, learned how to recognize the difference between ordinary discomfort and warning signs that demanded attention. The doctor spoke carefully, explaining risks with calm professionalism, and Mia listened closely, asking questions, memorizing instructions, determined not to miss anything that might matter. At night, when the apartment fell quiet, the weight of solitude returned. She lay awake with her hands resting protectively over her stomach, feeling the subtle movements beneath her skin. The babies moved differently, even then, as if already expressing individual personalities. Those moments filled her with a mixture of wonder and fear so intense it left her breathless. She whispered to them in the dark, promising safety, promising love, promising that they would never be alone, even when she felt deeply so herself. Financial reality pressed in hard. Mia took on extra work where she could, accepted smaller projects, cut every unnecessary expense without hesitation. She sold furniture that held memories, packed away pieces of her past to make room for what was coming. Each sacrifice felt permanent, but she accepted it with quiet determination. She was building something new now, and there was no space for nostalgia. Friends noticed the changes. They asked careful questions, offered help that Mia sometimes accepted and sometimes declined. Explaining the truth required energy she did not always have, and she learned how to deflect gently, keeping her story her own. Some nights, she wanted desperately to tell someone everything, to say Alex's name out loud and admit how much she still loved him, but she swallowed those words, afraid that speaking them would weaken her resolve. The pregnancy grew more difficult as time passed. Swelling, dizziness, pain that lingered longer each day. There were moments when fear took hold sharply, when she wondered whether she had made a terrible mistake by choosing to face this alone. During those moments, Alex's face surfaced in her mind uninvited, and she had to remind herself why she had chosen silence. She could not bear the thought of him returning out of obligation, of watching resentment slowly poison whatever remained between them. When labor began earlier than expected, it arrived with force and urgency that left no room for doubt. The hospital lights were too bright, the air too cold, voices overlapping as nurses moved quickly around her. Mia focused on breathing, on staying present, on trusting the people who surrounded her now. Fear pressed against her chest, but beneath it was something stronger, something unyielding. The births were long and exhausting, pushing her beyond limits she hadn't known existed. When the first cry filled the room, sharp and insistent, tears spilled down her face without permission. The second followed moments later, just as strong, just as alive. Relief crashed into her so powerfully that she sobbed openly, her body shaking with the release of weeks of tension and fear. 2 boys. Leo and Noah. They were placed in her arms one after the other, small and warm, their tiny fingers curling instinctively around hers. Their faces were nearly identical, dark wavy hair damp against their foreheads, blue eyes blinking up at her in unfocused curiosity. In that moment, exhaustion faded into the background, replaced by a fierce, overwhelming love that anchored her completely. Later, in the quiet of the recovery room, Mia watched them sleep in their bassinets, side by side, breathing in perfect, fragile rhythm. She felt a familiar ache then, the thought of Alex rising again, sharper and more painful now that she knew exactly what he was missing. For a brief moment, she considered reaching for her phone, imagined his reaction if she told him everything now. She didn't. Instead, she looked back at her sons and made a silent vow. She would be enough. She would find a way. Whatever sacrifices it required, whatever strength it demanded, she would give it willingly. That night marked a turning point she could not undo. From that moment on, Mia was no longer simply surviving the consequences of a choice. She was actively shaping a future built on love, resilience, and a promise she intended to keep, even if it meant carrying the weight of it alone. Life with 2 newborns erased any remaining illusion of control Mia had once believed she possessed. The days blurred into nights, measured not by hours but by feedings, cries, and the fragile rhythm of sleep she learned to steal in minutes rather than stretches. Leo and Noah rarely rested at the same time, as if instinctively taking turns demanding her attention, and Mia moved between them with a quiet urgency that left her body constantly aching and her mind permanently alert. The apartment felt smaller now, crowded with cribs, bottles, and the soft hum of white noise that never fully faded. Mia learned how to function through exhaustion so deep it felt physical, a weight pressing behind her eyes and into her bones. There were moments when she stood in the kitchen holding a bottle, unsure how long she had been there, her thoughts dissolving into fog before snapping back into focus at the sound of a cry. Yet even in the hardest moments, there was beauty she hadn't expected. Leo calmed instantly when she sang, even though she could barely remember the lyrics of the lullabies her mother once sang to her. Noah preferred touch, quieting only when she held him close, his small hand gripping her finger with surprising strength. Mia learned these differences instinctively, her body responding before her mind could analyze them, as if motherhood had unlocked something ancient and unteachable within her. The financial strain grew sharper as the weeks passed. Medical bills arrived with relentless regularity, each envelope a reminder that love did not pay for necessities. Mia returned to work sooner than she should have, accepting remote projects she completed late at night while the boys slept fitfully beside her. She typed through exhaustion, correcting mistakes twice as often, driven by the knowledge that every dollar mattered now more than ever. Friends offered help, but Mia struggled to accept it. Letting someone else take over, even briefly, felt like surrendering control she could not afford to lose. She smiled, thanked them, and declined more often than not, convincing herself that independence was the only way forward. Still, on the rare evenings when someone stayed long enough for her to shower uninterrupted, she cried quietly under the hot water, overwhelmed by both gratitude and relief. Alex's absence became a presence of its own. She saw him everywhere in the boys without wanting to. The shape of Leo's mouth when he concentrated, the crease between Noah's brows when he frowned, the unmistakable blue of their eyes when the light hit them just right. Each similarity struck her unexpectedly, reopening questions she had carefully sealed away. She wondered what Alex would think if he saw them, if recognition would come instantly or if doubt would cloud his reaction. On nights when sleep refused to come, Mia replayed imagined conversations in her mind. She practiced explanations, arguments, even anger, though none of them felt complete. In some versions, Alex was furious at being kept in the dark. In others, he was silent, distant, already gone emotionally before she finished speaking. Those imagined outcomes scared her more than loneliness ever had. So she remained silent. Months passed, and the boys grew stronger, their cries softening into sounds that almost resembled laughter. Mia watched them discover the world inch by inch, eyes following movement, hands grasping at nothing, mouths opening in wonder. Each milestone felt like a small victory, proof that despite everything, she was doing something right. Still, there were nights when fear crept in quietly. What if she became sick? What if something happened to her? The thought of the boys without her made her chest tighten painfully, forcing her to sit upright in bed just to breathe. She began writing notes, practical instructions hidden in a drawer, explaining routines, preferences, emergency contacts, just in case. It was a habit born not of pessimism, but of responsibility. By the time Leo and Noah were approaching their first birthday, Mia felt older than her years, shaped by sacrifice and constant vigilance. She had learned how to endure, how to provide, how to love fiercely without reserve. What she had not learned was how to let go of the part of her life that had ended when Alex left. That chapter remained unfinished, quietly waiting for a moment she still believed might never come. By the time Leo and Noah turned 3, Mia's life had settled into a careful balance that left little room for error. The boys were no longer babies, but they were far from easy. They ran instead of walked, argued instead of cried, and tested limits with a persistence that left her both exhausted and quietly proud. Their energy filled every corner of the small home, turning ordinary days into constant motion, and Mia learned to anticipate chaos before it arrived. The park became their second home. Every morning, she bundled them up or slathered sunscreen on impatient skin, depending on the season, and walked the familiar path beneath trees whose leaves marked time better than any calendar. Leo preferred structure, climbing the same steps in the same order and growing upset when routines changed. Noah chased everything that moved, fearless and loud, his laughter carrying across the grass. Mia knew exactly where to stand so she could see both at once, her eyes never fully resting on either. Strangers often smiled at them. Some commented on how beautiful the boys were, how alike they looked, how lucky she was. Mia smiled back politely, answering without offering more than necessary. She had grown used to the unspoken question that sometimes followed, the glance around as if searching for someone missing. When asked where their father was, she responded calmly that it was just the three of them, and she said it with enough confidence that most people did not push further. At night, when the boys finally slept, Mia sat alone with the weight of the day settling heavily into her shoulders. She read bills carefully, planned grocery lists with precision, and scheduled her work around preschool hours. Every decision was calculated, not because she lacked dreams, but because she had learned that stability mattered more than ambition now. Still, beneath the structure she had built, a quiet restlessness remained, an awareness that something unresolved lingered at the edges of her life. Alex returned to her thoughts more often than she allowed herself to admit. She heard his voice sometimes when the boys asked questions she could not answer easily, questions about families they saw in books or other children they met. She responded honestly but gently, explaining that families came in many forms, and that love did not always look the same for everyone. The boys accepted her answers without resistance, trusting her completely, and that trust both strengthened and frightened her. One afternoon, as she sat on a bench watching Leo carefully organize stones while Noah chased pigeons with reckless joy, a familiar feeling washed over her. The sense of being watched. She dismissed it at first, attributing it to habit, to years of doing everything alone. When she looked up again, her breath caught painfully in her chest. Alex stood across the park. He looked older, sharper in ways that spoke of success and responsibility, but unmistakably the same. For a moment, neither of them moved. The world around them continued as normal, children laughing, parents calling out warnings, but the space between them felt suspended, heavy with years of unspoken truth. Mia's first instinct was to stand and leave. Her second was to stay perfectly still, afraid that movement would break whatever fragile reality this was. Alex took a step forward, then stopped, his gaze fixed not on her, but on the boys. Mia watched his expression change as recognition dawned slowly, painfully, as if his mind resisted what his eyes already knew. The boys noticed him then. Noah waved without hesitation, smiling at the stranger. Leo studied Alex with quiet intensity, his head tilting slightly in a way Mia recognized all too well. It was the same look Alex used to have when concentrating, the same subtle crease between his brows. Alex's certainty shattered in that instant. Mia felt it as clearly as if it had been spoken aloud. The life he had imagined for her, the belief that she had moved on happily with someone else, unraveled silently as he stood there, staring at the undeniable truth reflected back at him in two small faces. She stood slowly, her movements controlled, her voice steady when she finally spoke his name. Alex. He looked at her then, really looked at her, and the weight of understanding settled fully between them. There were no accusations in his eyes, only shock, regret, and something dangerously close to grief. In that moment, Mia knew that the past she had carried alone was about to demand its place in the present. And there would be no turning away from it now. Alex did not approach immediately. He stood where he was, as if crossing the distance too quickly might cause the moment to disappear, like something imagined under the weight of exhaustion. Mia noticed that hesitation and understood it better than she wanted to. The certainty he had carried for years had cracked, and now he was standing in the uncomfortable space where truth demanded courage. Leo was the first to speak. "Mom," he said quietly, still watching Alex with careful focus, "who is that?" Mia inhaled slowly, grounding herself before answering. "That's someone I used to know," she replied, choosing her words with care. "Someone important." Alex flinched almost imperceptibly at that, but he nodded, accepting the restraint. He stepped closer then, stopping a few feet away, his attention shifting between the boys and Mia as if afraid to look too long at either. "They're beautiful," he said, his voice lower than she remembered. "How old are they?" "3," Mia answered. "Leo and Noah." The names seemed to land heavily in his chest. He repeated them quietly, testing their shape, as though saying them aloud might make the moment more real. Leo's gaze softened slightly at hearing his own name spoken by a stranger, while Noah grinned and stepped closer, curiosity overpowering caution. Alex crouched instinctively, bringing himself to their level without thinking. "Hi," he said gently. Noah laughed, immediately comfortable. "Hi," he echoed, then pointed at Alex's shoes. "They're shiny." Alex smiled despite himself, a genuine expression breaking through the tension. Leo remained still, observant, taking everything in with serious intent. Mia watched the exchange carefully, her heart tightening with a mix of fear and inevitability. "Can we talk?" Alex asked quietly, lifting his gaze to her. "Just for a moment." She hesitated, then nodded. They moved a short distance away, still close enough to keep the boys in sight. Leo followed their movements closely, while Noah quickly lost interest and began chasing a leaf skittering across the ground. "You thought I was happy with someone else," Mia said before Alex could speak. It wasn't an accusation, but a statement, calm and steady. Alex swallowed. "I did. I told myself that for years." "It made things easier," she said. "Yes," he admitted. "It did." Silence settled between them again, heavier now that it carried understanding rather than confusion. Alex rubbed his hands together, a nervous habit Mia recognized instantly. "They're mine," he said at last, not as a question. "Yes," she replied. "They are." The words hit him fully then. His shoulders sagged slightly, as if he had been holding himself upright by sheer force of will. "Why didn't you tell me?" he asked, his voice rough, but controlled. Mia met his gaze without flinching. "Because you would have come back out of responsibility, not choice. And I couldn't build a life for them on that." Alex nodded slowly, absorbing the truth even as it hurt. "You should have given me the chance to choose." "I chose for them," she answered. "And for myself." They stood there, two people who had once loved each other deeply, now separated by years of silence and sacrifice. Alex looked back toward the boys, watching Noah laugh as he nearly tripped over his own feet, Leo stepping in to steady him with careful seriousness. "They don't know who I am," he said quietly. "No," Mia agreed. "And you don't get to decide what that means yet." "I don't want to disappear again," Alex said. "I don't want to walk away from this." "That's not something you promise," she replied. "That's something you prove." The boys ran back toward them then, Noah breathless and smiling, Leo clutching a small stone he had apparently deemed important enough to keep. Alex straightened, instinctively stepping back to give Mia space, a gesture she noticed and silently acknowledged. "Mom," Noah said happily, "he talks funny." Mia almost smiled. Alex let out a quiet breath, equal parts relief and disbelief. He understood now that nothing would be quick or simple. There would be no dramatic reunion, no instant forgiveness, no clear path forward. But there was truth. And as he watched Mia guide the boys back toward the playground, he realized something with painful clarity. The life he had imagined for her had never existed. The one standing in front of him had been built without him, piece by piece, through endurance he had never had to learn. If he wanted to be part of it now, it would not be because he assumed his place. It would be because he earned it. The days that followed did not rush toward resolution. They unfolded slowly, deliberately, as if the world itself understood that haste would only damage something already fragile. Alex did not appear at Mia's door the next morning with grand gestures or demands for answers. Instead, he sent a short message, asking if it would be all right to meet at the park again, at the same time, where the boys already felt safe. Mia agreed, though her hands trembled slightly as she typed the reply. From that day on, Alex showed up quietly and consistently. He arrived early, always waiting at a respectful distance, never assuming his presence was welcome, never pushing for more than what was offered. He brought nothing at first, no gifts, no toys, understanding instinctively that trust could not be purchased. He watched. He listened. He learned. Leo remained cautious, standing close to Mia, studying Alex with the seriousness of a child who sensed complexity beyond his years. Noah, on the other hand, accepted Alex with disarming ease, greeting him with loud hellos and endless questions about everything from birds to why adults drank coffee. Alex answered each one patiently, sometimes clumsily, but always honestly, and Noah seemed to appreciate that. Mia observed everything. She noticed how Alex never interrupted her routines, how he deferred to her decisions without complaint, how he asked before helping instead of assuming. When Leo fell and scraped his hand one afternoon, Alex froze for half a second, then waited, letting Mia handle it while he stayed nearby, ready but restrained. That hesitation mattered to her more than she expected. One evening, after the boys had finally fallen asleep, Mia sat alone at the kitchen table, the quiet pressing in around her. Alex's presence had stirred emotions she had long buried under responsibility and routine. She found herself replaying moments from the park, analyzing his words, his silences, his restraint. It frightened her how easily the past could resurface, how thin the line was between memory and hope. A week later, she invited him inside for the first time. It was not dramatic. There was no announcement, no ceremony. She simply stepped aside at the door and said, "You can come in, but only for a little while." Alex nodded, understanding the weight of the invitation, and removed his shoes without being asked. The boys were curious but calm. Noah immediately pulled Alex toward his toys, narrating an elaborate story as if no time had passed at all. Leo lingered nearby, listening, occasionally correcting details with quiet authority. Alex followed their lead, letting them define the interaction, his laughter soft and unforced. Mia watched from the doorway, her heart tightening. Later, as Alex prepared to leave, Leo surprised them both by walking over and holding out the small stone he had carried since the park. "You can have it," he said solemnly. "But you have to give it back next time." Alex accepted it carefully, as if it were something precious. "I will," he promised. After he left, Mia sat on the edge of the couch, staring at the place where he had been. She felt conflicted, exposed, and deeply tired. She had built her life around certainty and control, and now both were being tested in ways she had never allowed before. The following days brought small changes. The boys began asking when Alex would come again. Mia answered honestly, saying she didn't know, that they would see. She refused to make promises she could not guarantee, even as a part of her began to imagine what stability might look like with him truly present. One night, after Noah had fallen asleep mid-sentence and Leo lay quietly beside her, Mia stared at the ceiling and admitted something she had avoided for years. She had never stopped loving Alex. But love alone was no longer enough. Trust had to be rebuilt slowly, carefully, through action rather than intention. She knew that opening the door further meant risking disappointment not only for herself, but for her sons. The thought terrified her, yet the alternative, closing herself off completely, felt just as impossible now. Somewhere between fear and hope, Mia understood that the hardest part was not letting Alex back into her life. It was allowing herself to believe that this time, he might stay. The turning point did not come with a dramatic declaration or a sudden confession of love. It arrived quietly, disguised as an ordinary day, the kind that had once made up Mia's entire life before Alex returned. The boys woke early, arguing over which shoes belonged to whom, their voices filling the apartment with familiar chaos. Mia moved through the morning routine on instinct, packing snacks, tying laces, brushing hair, her mind already planning the day ahead. Alex arrived just after breakfast, as he had begun to do more often. He no longer waited at a distance. He stood at the door, patient, hands relaxed at his sides, meeting Mia's eyes without expectation. She let him in without comment, a small gesture that still carried weight. They went to the park together, not as a cautious experiment this time, but as something closer to routine. Leo walked between them, holding Mia's hand on one side and Alex's finger on the other, pretending not to notice the significance of it. Noah ran ahead, fearless and loud, calling back to make sure they were watching. For the first time, Mia felt a strange sense of balance settle over her. Not certainty, not security, but something steadier than fear. Later that afternoon, as the boys played nearby, Alex turned to her with a seriousness that made her heart tighten. "I know I can't change what I missed," he said quietly. "And I know I don't deserve trust just because I ask for it. But I want to build something real with them, and with you, if you'll let me." Mia looked at him for a long moment, searching his face for urgency, for pressure, for anything that felt like a demand. She found none. Only patience, and a quiet willingness to accept whatever answer she gave. "I won't protect them from you," she said slowly. "But I will protect them for them. That means you stay, even when it's hard. Even when it's inconvenient." "I will," Alex said without hesitation. The months that followed tested that promise in small, unglamorous ways. There were sleepless nights when Noah was sick and Alex stayed on the floor beside his bed. There were preschool meetings, rushed dinners, forgotten backpacks, and moments of frustration that had nothing to do with the past and everything to do with real life. Alex showed up for all of it. He learned when to step forward and when to step back. He made mistakes, apologized for them, and did not disappear when things became uncomfortable. Leo began calling him Dad one afternoon without announcement, as if the word had simply found its place. Noah followed immediately, louder and prouder, repeating it until Alex laughed and wiped his eyes at the same time. Mia watched from the doorway, her chest aching with emotion she no longer tried to suppress. One evening, after the boys had fallen asleep, Mia and Alex sat together in the quiet living room. The city lights glowed softly outside the window, and the past felt distant, no longer sharp, no longer defining. "I thought you were happy with someone else," Alex admitted. "Believing that made it easier to live with my choices." Mia nodded. "And I thought you'd never stop choosing work over us. Believing that made it easier to survive." They sat in silence after that, not uncomfortable, not tense, simply aware of how far they had come to meet again in this place. Alex reached for her hand slowly, giving her time to pull away. She didn't. What they built was not perfect, but it was honest. It was shaped by patience, by shared responsibility, by the understanding that love was not proven in words, but in presence. Sometimes a person convinces himself that the past has moved on without him. Sometimes he tells himself that someone else has taken his place. But all it takes is one moment, one look into familiar eyes reflected in children he never knew, to understand the truth. He was not too late. He was finally where he was meant to be.